Ha ha ha, yes, before you ask, I am doing this intentionally. Yesterday, we made the video Ottawa, it got worse. And today, we are saying the same thing, Minnesota, it got worse. Not because of anything to do with Cam Talbot, but because of what happened yesterday in Game 2 between the Minnesota Wild and the Dallas Stars. You see, I said this yesterday, but the Wild are now my team in the 2023 Stanley Cup Playoffs, and this is because they used an audio clip of me in their pre-playoff hype video. It was a really nice little attribution to content creators, and I was included in that, so yeah, there you go. I'm a fan of the Wild. Let's go Wild. True grit, right, boys? But either way, yesterday we saw ourselves a very weird sort of Lego curse come to fruition. Because in the video yesterday, talking about the Game 1 for Ottawa, or not for Ottawa, for Minnesota, we had made the entire conversation about how Cam Talbot was leaving the Senators and how Filip Gustavsson, on the other hand, had this crazy, record-breaking save performance for the Wild in Game 1, one of the better performances out of a Swedish goaltender, the best goaltender performance in Wild history in the postseason. And it was all fine and dandy, and I said, yeah, Filip Gustavsson is on top of his game. This is a guy that was really gosh darn good. He was one of the best statistical goaltenders in the NHL in the regular season. He was on top of the world in Game 1, and he's gonna start Game 2 most likely. Right? I said that. I said in the video, there's no reason for them to flip it out and start the other guy, right? I mean, Marc-Andre Fleury, sure, I get that he's been on the receiving end of these back-to-back deals. He was outdueled by Matt Murray in Pittsburgh. He was outdueled by Lehner in Vegas, and now you could say the same thing about Gustavsson in Minnesota, but they're not going to start Fleury, right? And then they did. They started Fleury, and Gustavsson did not get himself the night. There were conversations about why this happened, but long story short, Filip Gustavsson, who had allowed 2 goals on 56-something shots against, or 58 shots, or whatever it was in Game 1, ended up sitting out for Game 2, and Marc-Andre Fleury allowed a goal in the first Dallas Stars shot. And that kind of set the tone for the rest of the game, because the final score in Game 2 between the Stars and the Wild was 7-3 Dallas. Marc-Andre Fleury had 31 shots against. He made 24 saves, so we had a 7.74 save percentage. Now, I'm not going to say that the entirety of this game and its result was super dependent on Marc-Andre Fleury being good or bad, but realistically, the philosophy behind starting Fleury in the first place is one that I don't really think is all too practical. Now, okay, I'll get into the reason why they started Fleury, and in theory it makes sense, sort of, but just in practice it really didn't work, and even with hindsight included, I think a lot of people had the perspective that this wasn't the right move in the slightest. So the philosophy behind not starting Gustavsson in Game 2 was because the last game was a double overtime slobber knocker where the guy had to make 50-plus saves and he was out of his mind freaking good. So the perspective here is that, hey, we're going to give Gustavsson a break. We've got a backup that is good enough to come in here and potentially get the pipes, and we're going to roll with it because Fleury is an experienced playoff goaltender. He knows what it takes to win. He is definitely good enough to have himself his time to shine in the 2023 playoffs, even though he is old. And the other perspective is that we've been rotating goaltenders the entire year. It was never really Gustavsson's crease or Fleury's crease for the bulk of 22-23. We've been changing every few games, so having another switcheroo here makes sense. And it's sort of a philosophy that can't be applied to other teams, because you could say, hey, wait a minute, Jake Oettinger played the double overtime and now he started Game 2, and then you have yourselves in the past other situations, Vasilevsky versus Korpisalo, the, quintuple overtime game in the bubble, something like that, and they played 2 days later too. You have goaltenders that double, triple shift after overtime games all the time in the Stanley Cup playoffs, but most of the time, the backups behind these goaltenders are not as good as Marc-Andre Fleury should be. And for Minnesota, it's a strange little pattern because there is not that number 1 solidified guy. It's a 1A, 1B through and through, and it's carried them throughout the regular season, so the philosophy is why not do it here in the postseason, because it's worked so well for us so far. And I know it kind of makes sense when you say it on paper, but then again, just in application, you don't want to pull a guy who made so many gosh darn saves, who came away with the win, and if he's telling you he's okay to play, which I'm not going to go out there and say Gustavsson did or didn't, you start that guy. The only reason you don't start Gustavsson is if he says himself he's not feeling good about it and he's not good to go. Otherwise, you start your guy that came out there with a brilliant performance and you put him back. For Fleury, I mean, he came in cold, he allowed the first shot of the game, and the Dallas Stars just kind of had a field day. Roope Hintz scored a hat trick, for crying out loud. Now, not to say that the Minnesota Wild players and the defense were not at fault. It's not Marc-Andre Fleury, which is why they let in 7 goals. The players on the ice play a part in that too, but just carrying over momentum, you know? Like, this was seen as the wrong move the moment it was decided. Everybody on social media was like, wait, why did they start Fleury? Why did they start Fleury? Gustavsson was crazy good last time. Why'd you start the other guy? And then he let in the first shot, and they're like, yeah, why did you start Fleury? And then at the end of the game, yeah, why did you start Fleury? He let in 7 goals. 774 save percentage here, man. Like, I don't know if it's the Lego curse coming to play, because I said literally in the video yesterday that Gustavsson is probably going to get the game too, but he didn't. But either way, I'm saying here now, yeah, Gustavsson's gonna get Game 3. He has to. There's no way Marc-Andre Fleury is the starter for the next game, of course, bearing any unforeseen health complications that we don't expect to come up here. But either way, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below about the Minnesota Wild Dallas Stars second game of the postseason, how Marc-Andre Fleury was given the go-ahead to get the crease, suit up between the pipes, and he crapped the bed. Sure, the Minnesota Wild collectively crapped the bed, but Marc-Andre Fleury is the guy at the face of it all. He has himself, his face plastered on the Batmobile signal, festering into our minds that says, yeah, no, the Wild kind of had a bad game, and Gustavsson was not there to save the day. Do you think this was a justified decision? I talked about the philosophy behind it. Is there anything else as to why this was the case? Is there anything extra that I'm missing as to why they started Fleury over Gustavsson in Game 2? Is it really just that they don't want to overload the guy, and they've been rotating goalies the entire season, so they felt comfortable doing it here? Because if so, I mean, it's a pretty flawed philosophy in my opinion when you consider the caliber of talent that you have with Gustavsson and what you had seen in Game 1. But either way, thoughts in the comments section below. I hope you enjoyed this British 9, and bye.